Today we will explore the cosmology and origins of Judaism through a profound analytical piece by author Aden. This is a deep cultural and historical essay that does not delve into politics. If you're looking for a debate on the current political situation of the Jewish people or contemporary political views surrounding the State of Israel, this may not be the content for you. However, if you're interested in the historical and cultural dimensions and the formation of one of the world's oldest religions, then you've found the right place. The history of the Near East is a complex, multi-layered tapestry where great civilizations have intertwined, clashed, and influenced one another for thousands of years. Author has conducted extensive surveys on the cosmological perspectives of ancient peoples living in the Near East, particularly in the region known as the Levant, corresponding today to Lebanon, parts of Syria and Jordan. In the process of researching and compiling this article, the author sought to reconstruct the cosmological worldview once imagined by the inhabitants of this region. While it may not represent the official cosmology of ancient Israel, it serves as a compelling illustration of the early thought that laid the groundwork for Judaism, formed through a blending of local beliefs and external influences. Around 1250 BCE, the Sea Peoples began migrating and infiltrating the Mediterranean region. By approximately 1184 BCE, the fall of Troy marked the onset of a dark age that would last in Europe until about 750 BCE. These upheavals forced many coastal city dwellers to flee their homes, escaping war and resettling in the highlands to the south, now known as the Cerdo Plateau. It was here in these isolated mountain regions that Judaism began to take shape, not as an entirely new religion, but as a natural evolution of indigenous beliefs heavily influenced by the political and social turmoil of the time. Looking at a map from that era, you can easily spot the region where this religion emerged. By 900 BCE, roughly 300 years after the Mediterranean upheavals, the dominant cosmology belonged to the Phoenician state, a civilization thriving in knowledge, religion, and maritime trade. To the south near Egypt, the Philistines, a different people, had settled and developed their own distinct religious system. Meanwhile, the early Jewish community had taken root in the highlands around 1100 BCE, an area not governed by major cities and marked by a unique cultural identity. Though not friendly with the coastal refugee groups, sometimes even considering them traitors, the highland dwellers shared a significant commonality. They spoke Hebrew, a rural language that would later influence both Arabic and other Western Semitic languages. They also shared a wealth of religious symbols, cosmological philosophies, and a mythical worldview. Now let's embark on a journey into the cosmology of the Van people through vivid illustrations crafted by author Stanthorpe. In ancient thought, the wonderful waters above was a poetic and symbolic way of referring to the heavens, the highest of the three-tiered universe, the sea, the land, and the sky. In the Hubzu language, the word for sky is a compound of Sam Sky and Molly Bright. These words are similar to ancient terms for the sun, like Samus or Deadfire found in early dialects. Concepts of the great abyss chaos. Sea monsters and dragons are remnants of Akkadian and Sumerian cosmology. This worldview later seeped into early Hebrew scripture, depicted in the form of gods taming chaos to establish order in the world. The sea in ancient cosmology was symbolized by a dragon-like creature guarding the gates of the underworld, located at the farthest edge of the so-called Great Deep. This was the primal chaos, the intersection of life and death, of order and disorder, a notion clearly illustrated in Episode 2 of the Ancient Universe series titled More. Representing the Earth, the human domain was a dinosaur-like creature symbolized as Sorabada, Reach, a massive and formidable embodiment of the land. Above, ruling the sky, was a colossal bird or dragon, seen as the sovereign of the aerial realm, resembling the Kunpeng from Chinese mythology, the Anzu beast of Sumerian lore, and evoking the image of the phoenix in Greek myth. The three mythological beings mentioned above, sea, land, and sky, all appear in Hupt texts, but they are depicted as having been tamed by the hand of God, the supreme figure in the ancient Israelite cosmology. This idea did not emerge by chance. It is closely tied to the historical development of the concept of God in Judaism. Around 1200 BCE, in much of the southern and western regions, local belief systems had developed distinct divine archetypes. Among them was a youthful, heroic deity often described as the husband of Apsara, a goddess rooted in the southern legends. This divine figure shares notable similarities with the Babylonian god Marduk. The process of religious syncretism unfolded in two stages, initially through the construction of separate temples to worship this god, and later by elevating him to the status of a supreme deity. Through assimilation and integration, this god was eventually identified with El, and to some extent with Yahweh, ultimately forming a singular divine entity that became inseparable from the entire temple system, which would later serve as the foundation for Judaism. In ancient cosmology, the chaos dragon or primordial dragon can be seen as a symbol of destructive power comparable to Tiamat in Mesopotamian tradition. Although the exact form of this creature is no longer known in Western culture, many of its mythological symbols have either vanished entirely from language or survive only as metaphors. For example, the term Leviathan, which once referred to a giant sea monster, was later reinterpreted to mean a whale, as in the novel Moby Dick. In ancient Hebrew, the word was also used figuratively to describe large, clumsy creatures, such as oversized sheep, or even used as a coarse insult. A key place in ancient thought was Uminsau, depicted as a dusty, desolate wasteland, where wandering homeless spirits drifted endlessly. In the cosmology of that era, the concept of an afterlife was understood solely as a vague, formless existence. Clearer ideas of heaven-hell karma, reincarnation, or life after death did not begin to emerge until around 550 BCE, several centuries later. The only known cultural system that portrayed the afterlife in a way similar to Sheol, the underworld in Judaism, can be found in select passages of Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, written around 750 BCE. However, it's worth noting that these works were based on oral folklore dating back many centuries earlier, meaning that Jewish and Greek thought systems did not develop simultaneously, despite some striking parallels. There are also intriguing linguistic links. For instance, Homer used the word your phone to describe darkness, the north, and the sea-crossing journey, while in the contemporary Holbrook language, the phrase that raw phone referred to a mysterious type of deity, one with no clear connection to any existing linguistic group. What you see in this cosmic landscape is not merely the worldview of ancient Israel, but the product of cultural fusion between Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Levant, and the Mediterranean, a melting pot of Eastern and Western philosophies. Through trade routes, warfare, and migration, religious concepts, symbols, and philosophies were transmitted and reshaped. Judaism did not emerge in grand urban centers with majestic architecture, but rather in remote highland areas where its distinctiveness from the ancient urban civilizations was stark. The kingdom of King David around 1000 BCE elevated God to a national symbol, and from then on, many biblical passages began to romanticize local religious traditions. Much like the village guardian deity system in Vietnam, where each town has its own patron god, during that era, each region's lord was essentially a local deity, not necessarily the supreme god. However, these gods were often used as tools to maintain political order. It wasn't until the Babylonian conquest around 587 BCE that the concept of monotheism, belief in a single absolute deity, took clear form and became the core foundation of what Judaism would later become. However, at that time, people still held the belief, I have my God, you have yours, meaning each community, each people worship their own distinct deity. If my God dies, yours still lives. This way of thinking explains the complex and overlapping polytheism in ancient cosmology. It was not unusual. Rather, it was a natural result of the geographic, cultural, and religious fragmentation of that era. The initial stage of a broader ideological unification began around 800 BCE and became especially prominent by 750 BCE when Greek communities along the Mediterranean started to form early political structures, the precursors to the classical city-states. Around the same time, trade with the Phoenicians was re-established, and writing long known in Mesopotamia began to spread rapidly. A parallel process of political centralization also occurred. Empires started expanding outward and conquering neighboring territories. By 720 BCE, the Assyrian Empire had conquered the Kingdom of Israel. Later, the Assyrians were overthrown by the Babylonians, who were in turn conquered by the Persians. This sequence of events had a profound impact on the history of Judaism. After the Battle of Carchemish in 605 BCE, the Babylonian Empire launched a mass deportation of Jewish intellectual elites to Babylon. At the same time, populations from other parts of the empire were also relocated. It was in Babylon that the Jewish elite began to develop a new form of religion, one no longer tied to a specific temple or geography. This marked the clear emergence of monotheism within Judaism. When Babylon fell around 539 BCE, a portion of the exiles returned to their homeland to rebuild the ancient territory. However, this return triggered violent clashes with those who had remained there. These internal conflicts led to the second phase of monotheism, in which Judaism evolved into a political religion, dominating the entire region for centuries to come. In parallel, religious civil wars broke out between two factions: traditionalists who sought to preserve the old ways, and the Hellenizers who promoted the expansion of Judaism beyond its borders, embracing integration with Greek culture. Ultimately, the Hellenizing faction was halted by the Macedonian invasions under Alexander the Great, and later subdued under Roman rule. Now take one more look at this map. You will no longer see this as the worldview of a small religion at a single point in time, but as the collective cosmology of those who lived at the crossroads of the greatest ancient civilizations. This was the land between life and death, where below lay the chaos serpent of Mesopotamia, to the west the sea of the Mediterranean peoples, and to the north the sacred myths of the Greeks and later of Christianity. Such a cosmic map could only have been born through maritime and overland trade routes, and the intergenerational transmission of ideas carried by those who lived at the end of the Iron Age, explorers, conquerors, warriors, and ultimately the founders of Rome. If you found this video insightful, please like and share to support the team. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss future content. Thank you for watching.